Will be done in 40 minutes.
Yeah, sure.
To stop everything.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. This guy here. Full screen. So, thank you.
Okay.
All right. I need everybody's quick attention here. We have our last speaker now, Eric Swisher. And I would like to do a quick introduction about Eric. Eric started with ALL4 only 5 months after it was founded and has 20 years of professional experience as an air quality consultant. Out of college, he started his career as a process development chemist in the industrial sector, only to be lured away by the exciting life of stack testing. Wow, all jokes aside, stack testing allowed him the opportunity to see hundreds of different processes and work with people passionate about their operation. Whether it is the production of styrofoam cups or an animal crematorium, his past experience enables him to help bridge the gap between a source's permitting requirements and the day-to-day execution of the compliance, monitoring, and testing programs. With this, I would welcome Eric. Here's a toy for you. Right to forward, left to back.
One thing that was not mentioned in my bio is the expertise in PFAS, which is very limited, right? Like I mentioned earlier, and let Kevin go over, I mean, obviously the questions and stuff. We had another colleague of mine who was kind of, our leader of emerging contaminants. He's actually at another conference where they're really getting into stack testing and the emission testing around quantification of PFAS. So she couldn't be in two places at once. So I was voluntold that, hey, this is my baby, right? So anyway, figure out how hard could it be? PFAS, right? We hear things like ESG, AI, PFAS. We'll just short up, go through it and pretty much mimic without all the bells and whistles some of your slides that you talked about today. So that being said, if you were in the previous session, just respect for your time, a lot of overlap, things like that, nowhere near the level of expertise. Some of the things that wanted to walk through, similarly to what Kevin did, was what's changing from a regulatory perspective, and reporting perspective. What type of sampling and what mechanisms are out there now to do that, get that data collection, the sampling and testing, and then transparency, right? Like that is where we are all going. We need to get this data, and this data needs to be transparent so we can determine, if you will, who's to blame. Where's it coming from? First step in that data collection. So if we look at some of the regulatory things that what's next, what's down, what's coming up, is we have the minimus exemption removal that's pending. Have some drinking standards that are pending as well. Right? So now we're setting emission limits. Have the impacts from surplus substances and record for hazardous waste, and then also some cost of record keeping. What just heard for those of you who are here. So this one right here is kind of one that does have some impacts depending on the finalization that's proposed, and the comments that got and any changes. Basically what being a chemical of special concern, they are removing that de minimis threshold. So basically the concentration de minimis you didn't have to worry about. Now all of a sudden, if that goes away, you have to worry about it. So there isn't anything that like, hey, if you have something that doesn't have anything in it, I'm going to go ahead and just forget about it. Now you have to actually consider it as your 100 pounds per year. Where that becomes tricky is that, and like you mentioned, was SDS is out there. You got things that are labeled a certain way that, hey, we are less than this concentration level, so we don't have to worry about it. Well, now that goes away. So now everything needs to be reissued, or everything needs to be reevaluated with respect to, do I have any of this substance at my facility? And that's a pretty instrumental task there to get that type of information, type of evaluation, completed. In fact, I don't know, in here, Kevin, you may know, is they didn't give an indication of what reporting year it would become effective. Most likely it would start 2023. Did they mention that?
I don't know that. I don't know.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, there's enough of an impact here where when it goes final, and if it goes final as written, when it will become effective, right? Because a lot of the data usage, how much do you use, but what's in it, all that stuff needs to be figured out, and you get that information from the manufacturer for purpose. So we're looking at that pretty closely. That's going to impact, quite a bit of, or could cause a lot of effort just in knowing what you have. Now, zero, right? Not the concentration that's normally have to measure against, or evaluate. So here, also we got standards, right? So now we got public drinking water standards, and that's where it all starts. Start finding standards here, then you have to migrate those standards into facility permits. That is the mechanism. Now, Kevin mentioned that there are direct mechanisms for states to take what is coming out from a standard, actually migrating it over to actually a facility. That's kind of what the direction is going to go, right? Everyone was like, what is the standard, right? What number do we set? How do we measure against it? But now the number is set, from a public drinking water standpoint, that migration is very natural, to permits for a lot of states that are actively saying, hey, how do we implement this at the facility level versus measuring at the public drinking water. Mentioned, basically we've got these, a couple that we called out here due to their toxicity or they're likely being carcinogens. And we've got this kind of hazard index that Kevin went through and kind of showed you how that calculation works. Basically, you're taking the rest of these, right? You're kind of comparing them against one based on a calculation or formula against a hazard index. Circle designation. This is hazardous substance. Again, this could have some and will have some major impacts. I think a lot of you guys were concerned about the same thing. A lot of people are concerned overall. Who is the blame? Who is the person who's responsible for? And if we go down this road of circular and define it as a hazardous substance, now we've got the ability for EPA to step in and enforce on remediation. Or it's reimbursed for remediation to clean up certain aspects of PFOS. So this is a lot of implications. Primarily, the impacts on the site investigations and cleanup, the due diligence, right? Is like you get land transactions, things like that. How do you evaluate those as part of those things now? Because hazardous substance, and then also the liability concern is who's going to be the one holding the bag whenever you have to, or there's an issue with PFOS. And then RECRA, right now we've got hazardous substances, we've got hazardous waste. This would be more if they do now classify some of these PFOSs as hazardous waste, it kind of opens up a lot more from a regulatory perspective into, okay, now where does it fall? What rules do I have to apply with? What limits do I have to set from the generation perspective? And who can accept it? If it is a hazardous waste now, and I want to get rid of it, where do I send it, right? Who will take it based on designation of now being hazardous waste? the landfill is the one that are probably the ones that are most concerned about that, is because I've been getting stuff forever that's not, that has stuff in it, and now you're classifying as hazardous. What do I do now? That's a really, really major concern. They're the ones from a liability perspective that were really like say, hey, this is an issue. I believe EPA said they were going to address that in the proposed rulemaking. I don't know if you had any more to add there.
Similar to water treatment plants, where, they receive things and they're the ones left holding the liability because they've got things that they're generating that cause solids. In this case, it creates a really tricky situation.
So don't know if there'll be an exemption, don't know what's going to happen there, but there's got to be some way to account for that, because they're not starting with zero. They're starting.
So many consumer products for the last forever.
Yeah.
Stuff on Scotch guard.
And then also, especially from a landfill perspective, is okay, now that it is, what do you do? Might not be, the question might be, what do you do after if it gets redesignation? Because where are you going to send it, right? How do you make sure it's not coming in? And that's tricky from a landfill perspective, because the control over what's coming in.
There's a lot of talk on measuring and remediation. Is there any talk on prevention of original?
What you see now is they said they're going to move from using these forever chemicals in any of their products. Now, whether or not, how it's defined and where they use it and all that kind of stuff, is always a lot of chemistry involved in that. But I think that's primarily what people are looking at, is just not even use them anymore. Let's replace them with something equivalent, something else, if it exists. Because really, when you start talking about if it's there, it's a problem, then the there is the only way to really attack it.
You get the runoff and the drinking water that you're testing, but it's really water run.
Yeah.
You got to stop it.
I don't know if there's any discussion around that, and I think that EPA would say you can't do anything that has it in people. That would be asked for them to prohibit the use of it.
Well, it's so many constituents too.
It's like a however, they can make it on the back end. They can make the decision for you on the back end by saying, well, here's the limitations, or here are the standards that you need to meet. Whether it be from wastewater treatment plant, with air emission, whatever, and then kind of backs you into we can't meet it, or we just have to move in a different direction. So then you've got the development of, well, great, let's just not use it anymore, but what do we use? There's a whole subset of, there's a reason why some of these things are being employed, because they have certain characteristics that are they're valuable to what their tasks they were, assigned to do, and find a replacement.
Just that, when we talk about like personal care products or pans and stuff like that, the regulatory community is really hoping to put some guidance in place to reduce risk for people drinking water. They would love to move all of those conversations upstream and have people stop putting in these products. But I would be surprised if there was any action to say, stop using your pans, throw your pans away, things of that nature. That's just not the way that they regulate. They're regulating right now and moving.
It also comes down to transparency on it. As soon as everybody knows who is using them, then it becomes decision-making is, how am I going to position, a company or my company from a marketing perspective, a PR perspective, in a good light, right? And I think that's what transparency does. It's like, we have rules, you can meet these rules, but yet your name, and there's going to be a map on the website that shows kind of all this stuff and plain, right? Especially in personal care, family care products, because they're huge consumer driven, from an environmental perspective. Then we have obviously or another subset of TSCA record keeping and reporting, requirements. This right here is interesting because when we talk about use, is that the significant new use rule would be somebody who maybe stopped using PFOS or is planning to use PFOS. Moving to the future, you would have to actually notify the EPA saying, hey, we're bringing something in that has these targeted PFOS. I don't know, the process for, will EPA approve it, not approve it? You have to go through some sort of study to show, hey, here's how we're using it and whatever. Not sure how all that stuff plays out. But here it would be, if you want to use it, again, you stop using it and you need to use it, or if you're bringing a new product in, then there would be a notification prior to use with EPA. So it kind of gets back to the, now they're going to know if you're going to start incorporating that into your process.
If that's an avenue for ALL4 to continue to use. It's not a new use.
No.
But it'd be, I don't know.
Well, or what if you stopped using it and you find out what your replacement one maybe wasn't as effective and you need to go back to it because I got to put the fire out, right? So it could be, a stop and a start versus you just brand new. So everyone's after data right now. For the longest time, everyone was challenged with, well, what methods do we use? How do we get it? We have to go really, really low. Everyone's different. So now we're starting to see the kind of the technology around the testing to get to a point to where, okay, we have the ability to test, have the ability to, sample. Let's go ahead and start doing data collection. And this becomes even interesting because what data can show, it's going to show likely PFOS somewhere, and you may not have any idea where it comes from, right? So then what, right? It's not from us, but I'm testing it, I'm seeing it at my facility. So very, instrumental one methodology and the stuff that is being utilized is adequate, but also then what, right? What do you do from there? Because even from a TRI perspective, if you find it on your facility, you don't have to report against TRI because it's not coming in and you're not using it. You kind of don't fit all the thresholds from a reporting standpoint. You found it, so now what, right? So there's going to be a lot of things this data is going to show us, or not show us, or be able to kind of, from an evaluation standpoint, more data is better than limited, especially when we get into the air side, because a lot of it's focused right now on drinking water, which, but as we get there and air component of that is something that a lot more testing is being done from an engineering perspective, but then also how does that get pulled in? How it's used permitted, what levels do you permit, same challenges.
So when you talk about sample program or the air emissions, like is it for all that fall under that PFOS, or is it just the 6 or 10 or however many those are listed?
On the air side, I think the list is up to 50. PFOSs they can identify. But again, great question. The list is growing and growing and growing.
Yeah, you do it today, you may not find anything. You do it a year, and now you find something new. I'm just curious.
So here, some NPDWR permits are actually administered by EPA at the state level. Others, the state has the program. So EPA, kind of put together some guidelines for here's how we are going to test. Here's how you're going to monitor, for PFOS. A lot lot of states that don't have the EPA oversight of their NPDES permits are actually utilizing those as ground as guidelines to say, okay, look, we have a guideline document out there, talks about the most current, up-to-date methodologies for doing sampling and analysis. Let's go ahead and just lean into those. Otherwise, those that we develop our data set for facilities that are. And again, this, we are sampling a lot of this is, public water systems, but that's where it starts, right? We're collecting data, we're looking at it, they're doing this over a several year period, and that they're once they started beginning shortly, or if they haven't already started, I don't know the status of where they are in that sample collection. So basically now we're starting to get data at, various places from the drinking water side. Now let's figure out where that stuff is coming from. And this one only affects a limited people, but again, it's the declaration of you will test, we will collect data, and we will see what that data looks like. Mentioned that this basically at the Source Evaluation Society, where my colleague is, who's one that would typically be doing this presentation. Yesterday was just about all PFOS air sample, right? Stacks. Right? And the challenges from an analytical perspective, also from a sampling perspective, and then from the blanks. I mean, really, it's a highly intense blank program because it's so prevalent that you have to make sure that you're not bringing it with you, or it's not in some of the sampling needs that you're utilizing. So a whole bunch of activity, around this, and like I said, right now, other than some facilities that had to go through major PFOS testing, majority of the testing that we're seeing is engineering. Like, okay, do we have it? I haven't seen a permit condition for air testing, other than something in consent, stuff like that, where people had to do testing. I don't know if you've seen anything in the permit for air.
Not voluntarily.
Yeah, but like Kevin mentioned, now's the time to get kind of house in order, figure out whether or not do we have a reason to test, and if we do, what could we find, and obviously an attorney client guidance from counsel on one. And this is kind of the direction, right? This is where we're all going. It's transparency. Is we need to, and states are putting out the forefront. EPA has an interactive PFOS analytic tool, and it's the data coming into these tools is interesting because it's coming from a whole bunch of different places, and therefore some of the data that's coming in can make it a representation of your facility that may not be true and accurate because of the data that's coming in. So as you go through and you review, what is this? How does this tool represent your facility? You need to kind of take a step back and say, okay, do I understand where the data set's coming from and how are they getting drawing to these conclusions out of their analytical. Some takeaways here. I think we talked about most of them here, but we got comments, areas that are still open, some have passed. Even getting a flavor for what those comments are is helpful. What questions are being asked, who's asking them, and if EPA will answer them. And sometimes they will answer comments, sometimes they will answer the wrong question, the one that's not asked. But that type of process will give you an idea where the direction of the rulemaking is going, or what people are concerned about. And then the public availability of data. You always got to be mindful of what's out there. More transparent, which means more scrutiny. Commenting on the rules, the ones that are still open. A lot of folks are, leaning into there or relying on their trade organizations. It's a great place to start to be involved in those. Typically, are folks that will pull together comments and submit them on behalf of industry sectors. And if you are doing sampling, you want to make sure you get the right people doing the right stuff, both in the collection, but then also at the laboratory level. Because these are becoming, because of the detection limits, everything is going so low, right? You need to have expertise, method development, as well as the quality assurance around that data. And then legal, right? I mean, this is something that just don't go out and do without talking with stakeholders. One of those stakeholders is almost always going to be an aspect of legal representation on how do you handle the data, what do you do when you find it, and is it disclosable on client privilege that may be invoked on a project or a sampling program. Questions? Or
Multiple options. Treatment.
But you mentioned that you guys are actually disposing of it, incinerating it a little bit at a time, just get rid of it.
All the excess that we don't need. Fire system. Yeah, to.
I mean, it's one of those things too, like, from what do you do with it? Well, I don't know how technologies are emerging because there's such a need out there. What we do next year may be completely different than the options this year. I think the question was asked during your presentation, which one is becoming the leader or becoming the forefront in control? Any thoughts on your options?
Yeah, I mean, looking at your lake water. That's pretty high now. Probably not going to reduce volume. If you're looking at something that's take that in an absorptive way, so very similar to your carbon. But you have to discharge it from that. It's transferring it. Destruction, it's really challenging. I was here last year, and I'm from a deep well injection disposal facility. Saying this is a permanent facility, we accept hazardous waste, shoot it down the ground 2 miles, never be seen again. I'm a geological engineer, and I'm a little uncomfortable with that, you know? What would you be comfortable with? Personally, I think incineration is a fine method if we get enough analytical understanding. I think some of the oxidation technologies are pretty exciting. Those are typically a water solution at a concentration, and you're applying a ton of energy to a real small volume, but it destroys it. You can test it pretty well. There's innovative stuff out there, but I'm not very good. It's a long time.
With incineration, not only what PFOS may still be left or maybe organized or whatever, but there's also potential for HF, strong acid to be formed in the incineration process. Sometimes I've seen when you have to scrub it afterwards, just because it's very corrosive. Yeah, so that's hard to do.
One of the other problems, timing wise, incineration and disposal guidance was after hazardous listing time. So
Right.
that's one. The other thing is firefighting from that issue. They ended up discussion about enforcement discretion for the hazardous. Did write in the rule. And players very uncomfortable. That's that's a problem.
Well, mentioned that we're having trouble even getting reliable data on the various monitoring. Is there reliable health?
Like toxicity.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, I don't know that process for the toxicity evaluation, but, you know, they are, you know, they have data, enough data where they are starting to assign this one is more toxic than this one. Or this one, we have enough data to assign toxicity, and these other ones we don't yet. So I don't know if the ones that maybe might be on, you know, kind of in the bullseye right now, they may be later down the road because they're finding more and more and more out, you know, about. I don't know if there's any.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, certainly PFOA and PFOS have a lot of data, and that's pretty good times in their health effects. They've also been studied for a very long time. It takes a lot of time to put together a tox program. I'm not a toxicologist. The most recent numbers that they put out, the MCLs, were based on an observational study, which is we're looking at a population of people over time, and it was based on suppressed immune system response to diphtheria. So they said, what are the PFAS concentrations in kids who are being breastfed, who aren't being breastfed, who have a combination of being breastfed and not being breastfed? What are their PFAS concentrations, and what are their responses to the DD vaccine that they get in this, you know, special subset of the community? And they saw that the higher the PFAS concentrations were, the lower the DBT response was, or the vaccine didn't work as well. They didn't see people actually get the disease. They saw that the response to the vaccine had decreased, and they correlated that. They associated causation as well. My favorite anecdote is that correlation is not causation. Over 99% of people in America who develop colon cancer use toilet paper. We should get rid of it. It's not causation necessarily. Observational studies are very challenging to defend technically. That's what they use to get to the 4 parts per trillion. Now the 70 parts per trillion, that was based on cancer.
This is a web page for current understanding of the human environmental risk of PFOS, and it says current scientific research suggests that exposure to high levels of certain PFOS may lead to adverse health outcomes. High levels. That's what I'm quoting EPA. I don't know what they consider high levels. I don't consider parts per trillion a high level. The only thing I know about toxicology is those things. They've lost their state. How many? We're looking for replacement for our project. We're not happy. If I work in a refinery and if that tank cuts on fire, I don't give a crap about my exposure on the fire up before I get it. This is crap.
The other thing that I don't like, the other thing that I think is interesting is do these new regs, they have to do a financial evaluation.
As to who's losing?
What's that?
As to who's losing?
Yeah. What's the anticipated cost to, because, you know, they want to have safeguards in there to not be too much assumptions that they make. that are made, sometimes don't realistically, okay, what the approach is, we want to go upstream and have people stop using it. Why? Because if we had to assume that we're treating it on scale, possibly over the threshold, we wouldn't. It's frustrating, but I understand. And again, I'm not here to offend vendor, advocate, just share what's coming.
Else?
Thank you very
All right,
much.
thank you.
Thank you, Eric. You shouldn't discount your knowledge. You equally have good knowledge. Did very well. Yes. Yeah, there's no more presenter. Time to go for a coffee.
We got missed on the back row.
Oh. That's very nice of you to show up. Not everybody wants to show up for sign up. Just put your name and company.